In a world that had long lost its former glory, Earth had become a shadow of what it used to be. The cities, once bustling with life, were now deserted and crumbling. Only a few remained, living among the ruins, trying to make a life in a land scarred by endless wars and environmental collapse. Ben Carter, a mechanic by trade, was one of the survivors. His world had turned into a struggle for survival every day, trying to find enough food and resources for his young daughter, Lily. Ben had once dreamed of a life filled with promise, a life where he could provide for his family, fix things, and make a home. But those dreams had shattered long ago, much like the cities he used to visit with excitement. Now he spent his days scavenging, trying to find spare parts to repair old machinery and make some extra money. It was never enough. The world's resources were running out, and so was the hope of ever seeing things improve. His small apartment, tucked away in one of the last livable corners of the city, barely kept out the cold. Lily was sick, and Ben could do little to help her. The food they had was barely enough to keep them alive, and with every passing day her condition grew worse. "She's starving, Dad," Lily had begged him just the night before. Her voice, once filled with laughter and joy, was now filled with a haunting desperation. Ben had tried his best to soothe her, but there was little comfort he could offer. He wished he could do more, but every time he tried to make things better, it seemed like the world got worse. Lily's thin arms clung to him like a lifeline, her once bright eyes now dull and tired. She wasn't just hungry. She was weak, and her body was beginning to shut down. Ben had promised her that things would get better, but he didn't know how. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Ben stood at the window of their small apartment, looking out into the dark city. The streets below were eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of distant explosions or the clatter of metal scraping against concrete. The last of the food supplies had dwindled to nothing, and he was running out of options. He had been to every market, every trading post, and every person he knew, but there was nothing left. The world outside seemed indifferent to their suffering. All he could do was search for scraps, hoping for a miracle. It was then that he saw it, a bright light in the distance. At first, Ben thought it was just another of the fires that had been lighting up the sky lately. But this was different. The light was too bright, too steady, and too far out of place. It wasn't the usual fiery orange glow of a distant explosion. This light had a cold, metallic sheen, and it was moving, slowly but steadily, towards the ground. Ben squinted, trying to make sense of it. The light grew bigger, and then, to his surprise, he saw a shape emerging from it, a ship. A large, glowing vessel that seemed to be descending rapidly from the sky. His heart raced. This was no ordinary aircraft. It looked alien. He had heard rumors about strange occurrences, about sightings of odd ships and mysterious lights in the sky, but he never thought he would witness something like this with his own eyes. Ben had seen his fair share of weird things over the years, but nothing compared to what he was seeing now. The ship was almost like a giant ball of light, hovering just above the ground, casting a glow that illuminated the dark landscape below. It was close, too close, and the air seemed to tremble with its presence. Without thinking, Ben grabbed his jacket and rushed out of the apartment. His mind was racing with questions, but one thought kept repeating itself. What if this was the chance he had been waiting for? What if the ship held the answer to their suffering? With his heart pounding, he sprinted through the desolate streets, following the light, desperate for any hope that might lead him to something better for Lily. As he neared the crash site, the ship was almost on the ground. It had landed in an open field just outside the city, surrounded by empty farmland. The area had been abandoned for years, but tonight it seemed to be alive with energy. Ben's breath came out in quick bursts as he reached the clearing. The ship was huge, metallic, and glowing with an eerie blue light. The air around it felt strange, almost charged, as if the very atmosphere was alive with power. Ben cautiously approached the wreckage, peering around the corner of a nearby building. His hands shook as he tried to steady himself, wondering what kind of world he had just stepped into. He could see a hatch on the side of the ship slowly opening, and a figure emerged. At first, Ben couldn't believe his eyes. Standing before him was a woman, tall, with features unlike anything he had ever seen before. She was clearly not human. Her skin shimmered in the dim light, glowing faintly with a pale, silver hue. Her eyes, however, were the most striking. They were large, dark, and intelligent, like those of someone who had seen far more than she should have. She was clearly injured, her body battered from the crash, but there was something about her that was both terrifying and captivating. Ben froze, unsure of what to do. Should he run? Should he approach? The woman, seeing him, tilted her head slightly as if studying him. She spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Help me!" Ben's heart skipped a beat. Her words were in English, though her accent was strange, foreign, but somehow familiar. It took a moment for him to process what she was saying. She was asking for help. "I can help," Ben said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. He didn't know why he said it, but something about the woman's voice, her plea, struck a chord deep inside him. He stepped forward cautiously, glancing back toward the city. He didn't know if it was safe to trust her, but what choice did he have? Maybe this was their chance to survive, to get the help they so desperately needed. As he approached, the woman's gaze softened, and she smiled, though it was clear she was in pain. She reached out a trembling hand, and Ben hesitated for only a moment before he took it. "My name is Zara," she said weakly, her accent more pronounced as she spoke. "I need help to heal." Ben nodded, unsure of what to say next. "We'll get you help," he said, as if that would solve everything. He didn't understand what was happening or who Zara was, but he felt a strange, unexplainable pull toward her. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was something else. But in that moment, Ben knew one thing. This woman, this alien from the stars, was their only hope. The sound of sirens in the distance reminded him that there was no time to waste. He helped Zara toward a nearby alley where he could hide her from view. As he supported her fragile body, a thought crossed his mind. What if this was the turning point they had been waiting for? He didn't know what was coming, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. The following days were a blur of confusion and strange discoveries. Zara, though visibly weak from her crash landing, seemed to recover faster than Ben expected. It was as if she was a living miracle, her injuries healing at a pace that Ben couldn't comprehend. But there was more to her than just her otherworldly appearance and advanced healing abilities. She was, as she had explained, from a distant star system. Her world had been destroyed in a devastating war, and now she was stranded on Earth, the only survivor of her people. At first, Ben had been cautious, unsure how to proceed. This alien woman, this widow, had come into his life so suddenly. He didn't know anything about her world, her people, or what she might be capable of. Yet, there was something about her that made him feel at ease, even though the rational part of his mind screamed that he should be afraid. There was an undeniable sense of comfort when Zara spoke, as though she carried the weight of endless knowledge and experience. Her calm voice had a soothing effect, and her gentle manner made her easy to trust, even though she was nothing like the humans Ben had known. The days passed in a strange kind of routine. Ben would go out in the morning to search for food and supplies, leaving Zara at the small apartment where they now lived. Though the place was far from ideal, it was the only shelter they had. Zara would rest and attempt to regain her strength, using the few resources Ben had to offer. She didn't ask for much, only that Ben help her with the basics: food, water, and rest. But more than that, she shared what she knew, what had happened to her world, how she had survived, and the advanced technology she had brought with her. Zara's knowledge was unlike anything Ben had ever encountered. She was able to fix machines that Ben had long given up on, reviving broken electronics with ease. She spoke of technology so advanced that it seemed impossible to comprehend, yet she could demonstrate it with simple gestures, as though it were second nature to her. She had no explanation for how her ship had crashed, but the more she revealed about her homeworld, the more it became clear that Zara was no ordinary being. One afternoon, as Ben returned from a long day of scavenging, he found Zara sitting by the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She hadn't moved from the spot in hours, and Ben could see the deep sadness in her eyes. The weight of her grief was evident, even in the quiet moments when she said nothing. He approached her cautiously, unsure how to help, but knowing that something needed to change. "Zara," he said softly, sitting down beside her. "Are you okay?" Zara turned her head toward him, her dark eyes meeting his. "I am surviving," she replied, her voice distant. "But it is difficult to be the last of my people, to be the only one left. My world is gone, Ben, my family, my friends, all lost." Ben felt a pang of sorrow for her. He could not begin to understand what it must be like to lose everything. The entire world, a whole species, wiped out in an instant. But he knew what it was like to lose something precious. He had seen his daughter struggle, his life unravel, and in some small way he shared Zara's pain. "I can't imagine," Ben said quietly, "but you're not alone anymore, you have us." Zara smiled faintly, though her smile was tinged with sadness. "I know," she whispered. "I am grateful for that, but sometimes it is hard to carry the memories of my people, to know that I am the only one left." Ben understood. He didn't know how he could help her, but he knew that whatever he did, it had to be something that gave her a sense of purpose. She was a stranger, yes, but she had become someone important to him, to Lily, and to the fragile life they were trying to rebuild. Maybe we can rebuild together," Ben suggested, his voice filled with hope. "I know it's not much, but we have each other. And I think we can make something better out of this world, even if it's just one small part of it." Zara's expression softened, and she placed her hand on his. "I would like that," she said, "but I have one condition." Ben raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" "I need to teach you," Zara said, her tone serious. "The knowledge I carry, it's too much for one person to handle. You must learn what I know, Ben. I can show you how to rebuild this world. Together, we can restore life. But you need to understand my people's ways." Ben nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. The offer was something he could never have dreamed of, an alien woman with the power to change the future of Earth, willing to share her knowledge with him. It was a huge responsibility, but it felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance he had been waiting for, the chance to make something of his life, something more than mere survival. The next few weeks were filled with learning. Zara taught Ben how to harness the energy from the alien technology she had salvaged from her ship, how to purify water with advanced filtration systems, and how to grow crops in barren soil using methods that seemed almost magical. She showed him how to fix machines and repair broken-down systems, things that Ben had only dreamed of being able to do before. The knowledge she shared with him was overwhelming at first, but it became clear that it was the key to unlocking a better future, not just for Ben and Lily, but for the world itself. One evening, as Ben was studying the data that Zara had given him, Lily came into the room. She had been quiet lately, and Ben noticed that she was looking healthier, her cheeks no longer sunken and pale. The food they had been able to grow with Zara's methods had made a noticeable difference. But it wasn't just the physical changes that had Ben's attention. It was the way Lily had begun to bond with Zara. The two of them had become inseparable, and it was clear that Lily saw Zara as a figure of protection, almost like a mother. "Dad," Lily said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. "Zara told me something today. She said that one day we might be able to fly like she does." Ben chuckled softly, looking at his daughter's bright face. "Well, she's a little bit ahead of us on that one, kiddo. But who knows, maybe one day." Lily grinned, her eyes filled with wonder. "I want to fly, Dad. I want to see the stars." Ben's heart swelled with love for his daughter. She had seen too much pain, too much suffering, but now there was hope in her eyes. And for the first time in a long while, Ben allowed himself to believe in that hope. The future was uncertain, yes, but with Zara's help they had a chance. A chance to rebuild. A chance to make the world a better place. And maybe, just maybe, a chance for Ben and Lily to live a life they never thought possible. But even as the days grew brighter and the weight of survival lifted slightly from their shoulders, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would test them in ways they could not yet understand. Zara had spoken of a war that had destroyed her homeworld, of enemies who had chased her across the stars. It was only a matter of time before those enemies found her. And when they did, Ben knew that their small, fragile world would be thrust into a conflict that neither he nor Zara were prepared for. As Ben looked out the window, watching the stars slowly appear in the darkening sky, he couldn't help but wonder if they had truly escaped the worst. And if they hadn't, if something was coming that would threaten everything they had worked so hard to rebuild, would they be able to survive it? Days turned into weeks, and the small apartment that had once felt like a cold, dark cage now felt more like a home. With Zara's help, they had transformed their living space, turning the small room into something that resembled a sanctuary. Food grew in small containers, planted with the strange seeds Zara had shared with them. Water, once scarce and hard to come by, was now clean and plentiful thanks to Zara's technology. The air felt fresher, the light brighter, and the warmth of the room, though simple, was enough to chase away the chill that had clung to them for so long. Lily was no longer the frail, weak girl she had once been. Her cheeks were flushed with health, and her smile returned, lighting up the room in ways that made Ben's heart swell with pride. It had been so long since he had seen her so happy, so full of life. She had begun to see Zara as not just a stranger from another world, but as a mother. The two of them spent hours talking, playing, and learning together. Zara had a way of telling stories, of describing her homeworld in such vivid detail that Lily would sit, wide-eyed, imagining the distant planet as if it were just beyond their reach. There was joy in those moments, a kind of innocence that Ben had longed for in their lives. But beneath the surface of this newfound peace, Ben could feel the weight of something dark looming over them. Zara had not spoken much about her past, about the war that had destroyed her world, but Ben had noticed the occasional flash of pain in her eyes whenever the subject came up. It was clear that she carried the grief of her people with her, a burden that she would never be able to fully escape. But what worried Ben the most was the way Zara would sometimes glance at the stars, her expression distant, as though she were waiting for something. Or perhaps as he feared someone. The first sign that something was wrong came late one night when Ben was returning from a small trading post, hoping to barter some of the tech he and Zara had repaired for more food. As he stepped into the apartment, he found Zara standing near the window, her face pale and tense. She didn't turn to greet him as she usually did. Instead, she seemed lost in thought, staring into the dark sky outside. "Zara," Ben called, his voice hesitant. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with concern. "They're coming," she said quietly. Ben's heart skipped a beat. He could hear the unspoken fear in her voice. He walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Who's coming?" "The ones who destroyed my world. The ones who are chasing me." Ben's mind raced. He had heard her speak of these enemies before, but he hadn't taken her warnings seriously. How could he? They were on Earth. Earth was supposed to be safe. But now, seeing the fear in Zara's eyes, he realized just how wrong he had been. "How do you know?" Ben asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zara stepped away from the window and walked over to the table where a small device lay. It was an advanced piece of technology, one of the few things that had survived the crash. She picked it up carefully, her fingers brushing over its surface. "This is a locator beacon," she explained. "It was built to help me find my way home. But it also acts as a signal, one that can be traced." Ben's heart sank. "They've found you," Zara nodded, her expression grim. "They've been tracking me since I left my world. They won't stop until they've found me and finished what they started." Ben clenched his fists. The idea that these invaders could threaten everything they had worked for, everything they had built together, was too much to bear. He had thought they had finally found a way to survive, to build a better life. But now it seemed like that fragile piece was about to be shattered. "Are they close?" Ben asked, his voice low with dread. "They're already in the solar system," Zara replied, her voice filled with resolve. "It won't be long before they reach Earth." Ben looked over at Lily, who was sitting on the couch, oblivious to the conversation unfolding before her. She was still so young, so innocent, and the thought of her being caught in the crossfire of this war made Ben's blood run cold. "We can't let them hurt her," Ben said fiercely. "We have to protect her." Zara's eyes softened. "I will protect her, Ben, I promise." Ben looked at Zara, his mind torn between the desire to protect his daughter and the realization that the fight was much bigger than anything he had imagined. He didn't know how to fight alien invaders. He didn't know if they had any chance of standing up against them. But he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let them take his family. "We'll fight," Ben said, his voice steady with determination. "We'll fight to protect Lily and this world." Zara nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I will teach you everything I know. Together, we can stand against them." The next few days were filled with intense preparation. Zara worked tirelessly, using her knowledge of alien technology to create weapons and defenses. Ben was amazed at the efficiency and power of the equipment she could build with just a few scraps of materials. She taught him how to use the devices, how to fight back, and how to protect their home. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for the future, fighting for Lily, and for the possibility of a better world. Meanwhile, Ben spent as much time as he could with Lily, trying to reassure her. She didn't fully understand the danger they were facing, but she could sense the tension in the air. The excitement that had once filled her eyes was now replaced by worry. Ben knew that he had to protect her, not just from the invaders, but from the fear and uncertainty that was creeping into their lives. It wasn't long before the first signs of the enemy appeared. Zara's device began to beep, signaling that the invaders were getting closer. The bright lights in the sky became more frequent, and the sound of strange, mechanical noises filled the air. Ben's heart raced as he realized that they were running out of time. "They're here," Zara said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to move quickly." Ben took a deep breath and nodded. "We'll do whatever it takes." The final moments before the invasion felt like an eternity. Zara, Ben, and Lily huddled together in the small apartment, readying themselves for the battle that was about to unfold. Ben had never imagined that his life would come to this, that he would be fighting for his family against an enemy from another world. But as he looked at Zara, standing by his side ready to fight for them, he knew that they had a chance. The door of their apartment opened with a sudden crash, and Ben's heart leapt into his throat. The invaders had arrived. The night had fallen heavy on the world outside, but inside the small apartment there was no peace. The air was thick with the weight of the impending storm. Ben paced restlessly, eyes flicking to the door every few seconds as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. Zara sat by the window, her eyes scanning the night sky, as though she could sense the approaching danger. Ben knew that their lives, everything they had fought for, was about to change forever. The invaders were close. Zara's strange device, the one she had used to track the signal, began to beep loudly, breaking the silence. Ben's heart skipped a beat. He looked over at Zara, who was already standing, her face grim but determined. "They're here," Zara said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. "We need to move quickly." Ben nodded, forcing himself to steady his breath. He had never imagined that his life would lead him to this point, fighting alien invaders to protect his daughter. But here he was, and with Zara's help, they had a fighting chance. Still, Ben couldn't help but worry. He had no idea how powerful these invaders were or how much damage they could cause. What if they were outmatched? What if Zara's technology couldn't stop them? Lily, still too young to understand the full gravity of the situation, stood by the door, watching the adults with wide eyes. She had grown used to the strange new world Zara had introduced them to, but the fear in the air was palpable. Ben could see it in her face. She knew something was wrong. "Dad," Lily said softly, her voice trembling. "Are we going to be okay?" Ben dropped to one knee and looked into his daughter's eyes, trying his best to smile to reassure her. "We're going to be okay, kiddo, I promise." Zara stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on Ben's shoulder. "We'll do whatever it takes to protect her," she said with a calmness that was both reassuring and unsettling. Ben knew that Zara had seen much worse than anything Earth could throw at her. She had survived a war, lost everything, and yet here she was, fighting for their survival. It made Ben's resolve stronger, even though the fear still gnawed at him. Lily's eyes darted between the two adults, her brow furrowed with confusion. What's going to happen? Zara kneeled down beside her and spoke gently. "We are going to protect you, Lily. The people who are coming are dangerous, but we are stronger than they think. We will fight, and we will win." Lily nodded, though her face was still full of uncertainty. She trusted Zara, trusted Ben, but this was different. The world outside had always been dangerous, but now it felt like something much worse was on the horizon. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Ben rose to his feet and turned toward the small table where Zara had laid out various pieces of technology. Some of it was alien, but with Zara's help, he had learned to understand how it worked. She had taught him how to use weapons, how to activate defense systems, and how to read the strange alien maps that would help guide them. He had learned quickly, but now it felt like all that knowledge might not be enough. "We don't know how many are coming," Ben said, his voice tight with concern. "How can we possibly fight them?" Zara looked at him with a steady gaze. "We don't need to defeat them all, we just need to protect this place, protect you and Lily. I'll do the rest." The words brought a strange sense of calm, but they also left Ben with a feeling of helplessness. He wasn't sure if Zara's confidence was enough to get them through this. What if they were outmatched? What if these invaders had weapons or powers that they didn't understand? But there was no time for doubt now. The invaders were near. Zara's device began to emit a series of sharp beeps, signaling that the ship was in the atmosphere. They could be seen through the window, the dark shapes in the sky growing larger as the ship descended. Ben's heart pounded in his chest. It was happening. The invasion had begun. "Get ready," Zara said, her voice low but firm. "They're coming." Ben took one last look at Lily, who was holding onto Zara's hand now, her fear palpable. He had promised her that they would be okay, but could he keep that promise? The enemy was just outside, and all they had were the alien weapons Zara had built. He didn't know what to expect, but he did know one thing: he would fight until his last breath to protect her. The door to the apartment suddenly shook as a loud noise echoed through the building. Ben's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a strange energy-based rifle that Zara had crafted from parts of her ship. He didn't know how effective it would be, but it was all they had. He checked the energy gauge, making sure it was fully charged. It felt strange in his hands, foreign, but Zara had shown him how to use it. He hoped it would be enough. Zara moved toward the door, her expression unreadable. She wasn't afraid. She had faced far worse than this, and now she was here ready to face whatever came next. The lights flickered, and the building seemed to groan under the pressure of the ship's descent. Then the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air. A thud reverberated through the apartment, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. The invaders were here. Ben's pulse quickened as the door shook again, this time with a force that made him feel as though the walls might collapse. His hand tightened around the weapon, ready to act at a moment's notice. Zara gave him a quick glance, her eyes locking onto his with an unspoken message. "We're in this together." And then the door burst open. The invaders stepped inside. They were tall, humanoid, but not quite human, with features that seemed both familiar and alien. Their skin was a pale, sickly gray, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They wore dark armor, sleek and menacing, that reflected the dim light of the room. Their movements were precise, calculated, and there was an aura of superiority around them that made Ben's stomach twist with fear. One of them stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room, landing on Zara. He spoke in a language Ben couldn't understand, his voice cold and commanding. Zara stepped forward, her face unwavering. "You don't belong here," she said in a voice that held both defiance and authority. She raised her hand, and the alien technology around them came to life, activating shields and energy fields that began to hum with power. Ben's grip tightened on the weapon as he prepared to fight. The invader's eyes flickered to him, and for a moment there was a brief flash of recognition, as if he had expected this resistance. The alien raised his hand, and Ben felt a sharp, unseen force push against him, knocking him back. But Zara was faster. With a swift motion, she activated a burst of energy, sending the invader flying back against the wall. The other invaders stepped forward, but Zara was already moving again, her movements fluid and controlled, as though this battle were a dance she had performed 1,000 times before. Ben steadied himself, aiming the weapon and firing. The shot hit its mark, sending another invader stumbling back. But more were coming, and Ben knew they couldn't hold off forever. They had to move quickly, had to survive. Zara, her eyes flashing with determination, turned to Ben. "Get Lily out of here. I'll hold them off." Ben hesitated, but then he nodded. He couldn't waste time. He had to protect Lily. He turned to the small room where his daughter stood, her eyes wide with fear. "Lily, we need to go, now." Lily nodded and rushed to his side, her tiny hand gripping his tightly. Together they fled into the hallway, away from the chaos unfolding behind them. Ben didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. As they ran through the dark hallways, Ben could hear the sound of combat echoing behind them. Zara was giving them a chance to escape, but for how long? Ben didn't know, but he was determined to keep running, to protect his daughter and to survive.